What happened to Chip? He was just joking, right?
Forget everything you just heard and go back to sleep.
Now, what would you do if you picked up a random payphone and the stranger on the end told you the world was ending in 70 minutes? That's the setup for Miracle Mile, a mostly forgotten gem from 1988. A movie that starts like a quirky romantic comedy and then takes a sharp turn into full-blown nuclear panic. Starring Anthony Edwards and Mare Winningham, this film unfolds almost in real time as one man races across Los Angeles, unsure if he's saving his new love or chasing a hoax. I remember the first time I heard about Miracle Mile was on the Canadian cable channel Scream, which was a premium channel devoted to airing horror, sci-fi, and thrillers. The commercial was pretty typical, giving a brief description of the movie, but that idea of a person answering a random phone and being told that nuclear weapons were headed their way, it really stuck with me. Now, it would be close to 20 years before I would actually see the movie, but a few years ago I got into a bit of a nuclear movie marathon mood and finally decided to dive in and check it out. The movie follows Harry Washello, played by Anthony Edwards, just a normal 30-year-old guy who meets the girl of his dreams, Julie Peters, played by Mare Winningham. I'm gonna get this right out of the way, but when director Steve DeJarnett spoke about one thing he'd like to change, the one thing he'd like to do is go back and CGI Julie's mullet. It was the 80s and did feel like the right thing to do at the time, but these first 5 minutes are just setting up our characters meeting. There's an innocent, flirtatious nature to how they interact, and it sort of reminds me of being back in high school, where you'd maybe look at someone quickly and turn away when they looked at you, or you'd do something so you'd stand out on purpose, but trying to make it look like you're not doing it intentionally. You know, whatever you can to get their attention while not just growing a pair and saying hi. Anyways, Julie is the one who makes the first move, and for the rest of the day, it basically turns into love at first sight. But just remember that these two first met at the La Brea Tar Pits, because that'll be important later on. Things move very quickly between these two, because Julie already has her grandfather with her listening to Harry play at some fundraising event. They take a tour through the Miracle Mile on a trolley, which is a part of LA that's sort of known for its museums and cultural heritage. There's a brief tonal shift in the movie when Harry is narrating about his new love, and it feels very ominous.
I think it's time for a change.
There's an awkward moment when Harry and Julie run into Julie's grandmother, because for whatever reason her grandparents got into a fight that they can't even remember and haven't spoken to each other in 15 years. Julie takes this pretty personally because she just wants to see her grandparents together. Harry drops Julie off at work and then plans on taking a little nap at his hotel, and then at 12 o'clock he's gonna pick her back up and they're gonna continue their little romance.
Third date, Harry? I'm gonna screw your eyes blue.
Yep, just your basic old-fashioned girl.
And so far, I'd say things are going very well. Although working at a place called Fat Boy, which is very close to Fat Man and Little Boy, in a movie that's about a potential nuclear threat, is a little on the nose, don't you think? Harry goes back to his hotel room, and because of an unfortunate series of events involving Harry's lit cigarette and a bird's nest, the hotel's power is cut briefly and Harry misses out on that 12 a.m. meetup. Harry's clock finally wakes him up at 3:45 a.m., but there's this little antiquated tell that something isn't quite right. As Harry flips through the TV, he notices all the channels are off the air. These days, all channels run like 24 hours for the most part, but from the inception of the television all the way until maybe the early 2000s, that wasn't the case. Harry now has to book it to Julie's work because he knows he may have screwed his chances with this girl. But so far, these 15 minutes or so play like any typical romantic comedy. Boy meets girl, they fall in love.
I think I've always been a romantic kind of guy. Just never had someone to be romantic with before.
And then something happens that will set off a chain of events that will lead to wacky scenarios. Although the scenarios here aren't so much wacky as they are kinda disturbing. I honestly wouldn't blame someone who put this one on without knowing anything about it and shut it off before they got to the diner scene, but I think the beginning is important for establishing these characters as real people. They don't feel like Hollywood movie characters, they feel like people you would actually know. Harry calls Julie to apologize, but she doesn't answer the phone because she's knocked out with a Valium. The phone rings, and when Harry answers it, it's a younger guy who's in a complete panic. He starts apologizing to his father, saying they're launching in 50 minutes, and the other side will retaliate in 70. What this kid doesn't know is he's not speaking to his father. He just told a complete stranger that they're about to enter into a full nuclear war. Harry then listens as the kid is gunned down by his superiors.
Forget everything you just heard and
From here on out, there's a ticking clock aspect to the film. Whether or not Harry believes the call is real, he was told they only have 70 minutes until retaliation. So from time to time, you'll notice a clock or something showing the time in the background, counting down as we get closer and closer to the supposed attack. Another interesting thing the director included were rats falling out of a palm tree and a cockroach on Harry's hand while he's on the phone. It was basically DeJarnett saying that if the threat were real, if there really was nuclear attack on the way, then rats and cockroaches would likely be the only thing to survive the attack. Harry tells a group of character actors what he was just told, and at first they're in disbelief.
Just wondering if you know if anyone here has a son named Chip?
I had an uncle named Chet.
But in short order, they start to argue and fight. Luckily, Denise Crosby is there, fresh off dying on Star Trek.
We won't hurt you, but we must help them.
To basically confirm what Harry is saying.
Because I used to date a guy who worked at the Rand Corporation.
Director Steve DeJarnett actually got a little pushback from people for having Denise Crosby's character use information from a guy she dated instead of herself directly. It seems they weren't happy that she wasn't the one in the know and instead relied on an ex-boyfriend. However, DeJarnett said if Denise knew everything and had all these connections, then the movie would suddenly shift focus to her, and everyone would just be following her mission instead of Harry's, which at this point now is to find Julie and get her to safety. Harry's car is stolen, so he's forced to ride with the others, but notices that they seem to be driving in the wrong direction. He told the cook that he needed to pick up Julie, but the cook has his own priorities, and those priorities include getting to the airport and on a flight to the Arctic. According to Landa, Denise's character, anyone and everyone important is heading there, which is a good sign that this nuclear war is actually going down.
You wanna jump? Jump when I make that arm wrap!
Harry is now faced with leaving the group, going back to find Julie, and then meeting at the Mutual Benefit Life building, where there will be an awaiting helicopter to take them to the airport. Harry jumps, and luckily it's 4 in the morning, so the infamous LA traffic hasn't quite started. In an early draft of the script, Harry was going to shoot off one of his own fingers to, I guess, prove to himself that it's a dream, but for obvious reasons this was changed, and instead he just shoots the gun in the air. He does, however, force a stereo thief named Wilson to pull over and take him to Julie. Harry briefly explains he needs to go to the airport, but he forgot something. Not very nice to refer to the love of your life as a something. Low on gas, Harry forces Wilson to pull into a taxi-only gas station, which I had no idea was a thing. And now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever seen a taxi filling up at a gas station. While at the gas station, Harry places a call to Julie's grandfather, telling him to wake up Julie and be ready. In the meantime, a very friendly gas station attendant thinks Wilson is trying to rob him, but Wilson explains that Harry made him drive there and that he's kind of crazy. A couple cops pull up, noticing the crazed man holding a gun, and things go sideways fast. Wilson sprays the cops with gas, one of the cops ignites herself by firing her weapon, and the entire gas station explodes. Remember when this movie was about a romance? Harry and Wilson escape in the cop car, but can anyone explain why the director decided to make Wilson a stereo thief and then have him get in the back of the cop car when he could have just as easily gotten the front? Harry is kind of forced to tell Wilson what's going on, but lies when he says the nuclear plant is going to melt down. I'm going to assume Wilson wouldn't believe him if he said nuclear war was about to break out because someone on a random payphone told him. They arrive at Julie's apartment. Harry tells Wilson to wait for them, but without a gun in his face, what reason does he have to stay? Wilson's also very worried about his sister, so Harry needs to hurry the hell up. Harry gets greeted with a gun to the face, but it doesn't take him long to convince the grandmother that they need to get the hell out of there.
Mrs. Peters, in a half an hour, there's gonna be a full-on nuclear attack.
Pretty much since Harry received the phone call, there's been a complete tonal shift in the film. However, when Harry walks into Julie's room and finds her passed out in bed, there's a brief shift in the music that almost feels peaceful. I also love that they perfectly frame it so you can see Harry, Julie, and the building they need to reach in the background. Wilson grows a little tired of waiting for Harry and decides to leave so he can grab his sister. When Harry, Julie, and her grandmother reach the lobby, there's a nice moment where Julie's grandparents meet and basically put their differences aside. I mean, they both know there's a nuclear attack on the way. Well, that's what Harry told them anyways. The two grandparents leave in a car, and Harry starts pushing Julie towards the building in a shopping cart, which has to be the most uncomfortable form of transportation ever. Julie finally wakes up, and the two of them run into her grandparents, who've decided they're not going on any helicopter, despite the building being literally across the street. Instead, they're going to spend their last moments together at a local diner. Julie's really happy to see her grandparents together, but still has no idea as to what's going on. As far as she's concerned, Harry's taking her on a balloon ride. Harry hasn't exactly told her what's going on just yet. He's still trying to protect her from the reality of the situation. Julie's grandparents take off, but she kinda wants to spend time with them, considering that it's been years since she's seen them together and happy. They arrive on the roof, but unfortunately, there's no pilot. There is, however, a pissed off Kurt Fuller, who's only 1 year away from screwing over the Ghostbusters.
Well, I had them committed to the psychiatric ward at Parkview Hospital.
You what?
Harry still refuses to tell Julie what's going on, but decides to leave her alone so he can go find a pilot. Are there a lot of helicopter pilots hanging around LA at almost 5 in the morning? It isn't until Vasquez from Aliens arrives that Julie finally learns what's going on.
Warheads? What do you mean,
LA
warheads?
Basin is a total overkill sector.
Oh my gosh.
Harry notices some people going for a run and follows them inside a 24-hour gym. He starts asking people if they or anyone they know can fly a helicopter, and for some reason, a woman walks out of a tanning booth completely naked. I don't know what that adds to the film exactly, besides now making it rated R. Harry then runs into Brian Thompson of all people, who says he can fly a helicopter. I feel like he should be a mascot for the channel at this point, considering how often he appears on it. Harry gives him the rundown on what's going on, and he's like, hold on, I need to bring someone.
Leslie, come on, we're going.
What the hell's going on?
Any problems?
No, there's no problem.
As tense as the movie becomes, I do get a laugh every time I watch this scene. What is Harry gonna say? Of course I have a problem with you bringing a boyfriend. I mean, if he wants to get his ass kicked by the alien bounty hunter, then sure, be my guest. As they leave the gym, Harry can hear Julie shouting for a helicopter pilot, so he tells the two men where the helicopter is and he'll be right back. A police car then smashes through a storefront with even more police in pursuit, and sadly, it turns out to be Wilson and his sister. There's a cutscene where Wilson is walking up the escalator with her in his arms that was removed for being too bloody. Yet only 5 minutes earlier, we had a completely naked woman that served nothing to this story. There's an interesting theme throughout the movie of what priorities people would have in the face of an imminent global threat. For Harry, it's finding his true love. Julie, it's seeing her grandparents reconcile. The gym rat, it's saving his boyfriend. Wilson, saving his sister. The people at the diner, it's creating a list of brilliant minds they'll need to start civilization over. The women on the helipad, it's repopulating humanity after it's destroyed itself.
We gotta repopulate a whole planet.
You could repopulate a whole planet.
For some, their reasoning seems a little more selfish, but in a situation like this, I don't think you can blame anyone for wanting to be with a loved one over the future of the human race. Wilson and his sister both succumb to their injuries, but what's interesting is Wilson calls out Harry for the lie about the meltdown, which Julie picks up on very quickly. There's been a few times where Harry has lied about what's going on, which begs the question if what he said is to be believed at all. There's still no evidence of an incoming attack, and there's this unreliable narrative that keeps people questioning if what Harry heard is even true.
He said you told him it was a meltdown.
I did. I didn't think he'd believe the truth.
What is the truth, Harry?
There's even more evidence that leads to the belief that Harry is wrong, as the attack should have taken place already. Although when Julie and Harry go to turn themselves over to the police immediately take off in a panic, as if they've been told something horrific is about to happen. Complete anarchy breaks out as people start to learn of what's happening, or at least what they think is happening. I mean, people are just straight up being murdered and assaulted in the middle of the street. There's also a disturbing scene where a reporter and his cameraman are gunned down live on air. Originally, they wanted Walter Cronkite to be in the middle of a report, but then say f*** it and walk off live. But that was eventually removed from the script because they couldn't get Walter. Harry thinks he sees the pilot running down the street and does the really dumb thing of abandoning Julie with a gun and telling her he'll meet her back up at the helicopter. Except it's not the pilot, and now he has to make his way through absolute chaos to reach her. The two meet back on the elevator, and Harry does all he can to comfort her when she's absolutely terrified. Imagine waking up from your sleep and finding out you only have 30 minutes left to live. When they reach the roof, the helicopter is missing, and Kurt Fuller is doing something to two dead women.
Look at that baby go! It's going all the way to Tijuana.
Well, it looks like Harry was right, but hey, at least the helicopters returned, although the pilot looks like hell. Unfortunately, it's a little too late, and just like how Harry and Julie first met at the tar pit, they'll also be spending their last minutes there as well. It's a very somber ending, but it's sort of fitting that they both die at a museum, maybe one day serving as a relic of the past, similar to the shadows of Hiroshima or the bodies of Pompeii. There's a brief moment where Harry tells Julie that the force of a direct blast could turn them into diamonds. He's not exactly being literal here, and more so trying to dissuade her fears. However, there exists an alternate ending, and by alternate ending, I mean a 3-second sequence, where after the blast hits them, they're turned into diamonds. The studio felt this short sequence lightened the mood way too much, and felt ending the movie with the blast itself would be much more fitting for the movie's overall tone. Funny enough, the studio originally pushed for a much lighter version of the film. Everything that happened from the moment Harry falls asleep was supposed to be a dream. The events leading up to his nap would have been real, but the rest, one long nightmare. They were looking to rework DeJarnott's script as a Twilight Zone movie, with an ending where Harry wakes up only for it all to begin again. Think Jacob's Ladder but with fewer demons and more LA traffic. The film wouldn't just be a segment of the Twilight Zone movie, it was going to be the entire focus. It was also planned to be shot in one continuous take from the moment Harry wakes up. But DeJarnott wasn't happy with the direction they wanted to take his script, so he turned it down. There are some hints that could lead viewers to believe it is a dream, since it all seems to start the moment he wakes up. Like the idea that all someone would want to do in their dream is to save their one true love, or Julie's dream of seeing her grandparents together. But I think it works better if it's grounded in reality and actually happened. The grandparents' reconciliation was actually the main focus in DeJarnott's earlier scripts. Instead of it being about a man trying to save the woman of his dreams, it was an older couple reconciling after being apart for many years. DeJarnott decided to change Harry to being a much younger man, which seemed to upset a lot of the studio heads at the time since they liked the previous version of the script. However, this change in age gave them an opportunity to cast some real star power. Initially for the role of Harry, they were looking at Kurt Russell, though he turned it down. Next up for Harry was Nicolas Cage, but he withdrew after getting a last-minute call to do Peggy Sue Got Married. Eventually, the role would land in the lap of Anthony Edwards, who was just coming off Top Gun at the time and was seen as bankable. However, when he first read the script, he threw it down in disgust because he thought it was awful. Though after reading it a few more times and finally understanding what they were trying to do, he fell in love with it. For Julie Peters, the studios wanted a more typical Hollywood starlet. They were originally looking to cast Jennifer Tilly, but DeJarnott refused. He wanted someone who'd feel more like the girl next door. This is when he found his Julie in Mare Winningham, an actress well known for roles in coming-of-age TV movies and the movie St. Elmo's Fire. This casting of Anthony and Mare unfortunately took a toll on the film's budget, as the studios were less likely to risk money on a film that didn't have much star power. Had DeJarnott made the movie the studios wanted, it would have had a much larger budget, bigger stars, and likely more explosions. The most important explosion being the nuclear blast had to be left on the cutting room floor, because DeJarnott just didn't like how it came out. Instead, we just get bright flashes of white, which works, because the explosion itself really isn't that important to the story. There's also the soundscape to the film, a synth-heavy score by Tangerine Dream, legends of 80s dreamlike dread. DeJarnott actually wrote the script while listening to their music and their score to the William Friedkin film Sorcerer. Their music provides a sense of hopeful energy for the first 15 minutes or so, but as the film goes on, it gets darker and eventually turns into this droning sound, sucking the life out of everything around it. The film was shot for roughly $3.7 million and made $1.1 million at the box office. Fortunately for DeJarnott, the movie did very well on home video rental, which is a source of revenue studios have basically given up on in favor of the paltry return they get from streaming services. So while the movie may not have done gangbusters at the box office, it did have a nice little cult following. On the 30th anniversary of the film, DeJarnott got cast and crew together to celebrate, and something very interesting happened. Anthony Edwards and Mare Winningham, who had been longtime friends, reconnected, and an actual romance between the two started to bloom. Both actors had their own lives during the 30 years since the film's release. They were married to other people, they had kids, and yet after all this time apart, just like the movie, they somehow found each other. During the height of the pandemic, their bond grew even tighter, and in 2021, they got married. I just find it fascinating that you have these two people that were so far apart, brought back together, and eventually got married. It's very weird how things just work out sometimes. DeJarnett even jokingly calls them his little diamonds. Miracle Mile is a tense little thriller that I think needs to be seen. It's got a lot of heart to it, but it's also very dark. I don't know what it is with me, but I just can't help myself from watching these depressing end-of-the-world type movies. But what do you think about Miracle Mile? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope you're having a great day and stay spooky!